welcome to a new storytelling podcast featuring both of us. And this week the topic is...
the hero in storytelling. And I think a typical hero we think about immediately is the superhero, which is often the protagonist in American comics.
Yes, the superhero is of course the main sort of hero that immediately comes to mind. What's typical for a superhero? Well, obviously superpowers is sort of the most typical thing.
Right.
And on the whole, usually there's one element that they have that they are supernaturally good at. Sort of like the Flash is supernaturally fast.
Yeah.
Or the Hulk is supernaturally strong.
Of course, you have more specific and rather far-fetched superpowers as well. Like, for example, Spider-Man. He got his superpower from a spider bite, and he can shoot cobwebs from his wrists. Now, that's specific.
That's very weirdly specific, yes. What's interesting about Spider-Man is sort of his superpower is not something that's inherent to him. He got it from an extraneous...
Yeah. I wonder if he was even good at gym before he got bitten by that spider.
I seem to remember that he was sort of a nerdy type who got picked last. And by the way, I think the same is true for a lot of superheroes. I don't know much about Aquaman, but the Hulk, I believe, is also the result of an experiment.
True, and I think it's every nerd's wet dream to be a superhero in secret, right?
I suppose so.
That's why all geeks have these Flash or Superman pajamas and underwear, right?
Yeah, let's not talk about that. You said you weren't going to mention my underwear. No, actually, I'm not a very big superhero guy. I don't have any superhero underwear.
Maybe for Christmas.
Yeah, I don't really need it, to be honest.
Okay, but of course, usually superheroes have one big superpower, but there are exceptions, right?
Of course, you've got your all-in-one superhero, the sort of the full option guy, the guy who delivers on every front. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's Superman.
Yeah, Superman.
It's my all-time favorite superhero because it's like my favorite pizza. He has everything on it.
Yeah. He's got your X-ray vision. He's got your flight. He's got your super strength, your super hearing, your super speed. And he can disguise himself supernaturally well just by wearing glasses.
Yeah, that's his biggest power, I think.
And wearing wax in his hair.
Right. And then you have all these superheroes. They kind of have a quality that's more like an ability, right? But then you have these superheroes who kind of depend on technology as well.
Oh, yeah, indeed. Like, Iron Man and Batman are sort of, I guess, the two that come to mind.
Their biggest superpowers, kind of that they're supernaturally rich, I think.
Yeah, rich and also very smart and good with technology, I guess. But, yeah, they don't really have any special super ability, really. It's really all about the gadgets and what they do is sort of, especially Batman, still within the realm of possibility to some extent.
Right.
Another example of a guy who's got a super ability, but it's sort of enhanced with technology, I guess, would be Wolverine.
Yeah, he would be like a hybrid, right? He has the supernatural power of healing, but then they experimented on him because of that. And put metal claws in him.
Yeah,
It's a bit like an Edward Scissorhands kind of tool to cut edges and throats all the same.
Yeah. Well, as you may notice, we're not the biggest superhero experts, so if we get something wrong, then
don't kill us, please.
We apologize in advance.
Don't send your super robots.
Yeah. I'll admit, I've never really read a superhero comic, ever. In my whole life.
We have a couple.
No, I did read... I think Batman, a few of the graphic novels.
Yeah, we do have a couple in the...
We do?
The cupboard, yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
I'll show them to you.
I read The Killing Joke and The Long Halloween, I think. Or only The Killing Joke, and it doesn't matter. Anyway, my belief is that superheroes are sort of a modern continuation of mythological heroes. Figures like Hercules and Achilles, especially Hercules is like, he is very clearly a superhero.
Yeah, it makes sense.
From the ancient days. From the olden days.
And they still call modern superheroes legends. So
legends of DC and what have you, yeah.
Oh, and Thor is actually a mythological character, right?
Oh, right. Yes, yeah, it couldn't get more obvious than that. Thor, obviously. Yeah. Who is both a mythical hero and a superhero. So it's not like I just had some amazing insight.
They needed a new superhero. They were like, let's just take Thor.
Yeah, but what I have to say, what I did think was quite original about the movie is that they made it so that Thor and Loki and Odin, the whole pantheon, they're actually aliens. They are people from a different galaxy or a different planet. And they actually did visit the Earth. They did visit the ancient Scandinavian countries. And that's where the whole mythology of Thor and Odin, etc., supposedly came from in the context of the movie, at least. I thought that was a nice way of making that work.
Right, yeah. In any way, superpowers, they come from magic or science or technology, or the characters are born with it. It could be a side effect of the Earth's sun, like in Superman's case.
Yeah, if they're born with it, it's like the X-Men, then it's presented as sort of the next evolutionary step kind of thing.
Right, and you get the discussion, is this a curse or is it a blessing?
Yeah. But I've never heard of a superhero where the power is just, he just happens to be super gifted for no reason at all. Except, of course, Rey from the new Star Wars movies. But let's not get into that.
Let's not get into it.
Now the question is, okay, you've got your superheroes and they've got all these abilities and that makes them cool, but is that what makes them heroes?
Well, I would say it's not the essence of what makes them a hero, because there are a number of villains that have superpowers too, right? And they are called supervillains.
You've got Loki, you've got Doctor Doom, you've got the Green Goblin, you've got Mr. Freeze. Usually they also have a kind of theme going, like Mr. Freeze has the ice theme going. And
also, we mentioned that superheroes are the protagonist of American comics.
Yes, that's why we're not experts.
Yeah, that's why we're not experts, obviously. But in Belgian comics, the heroes are very different.
Yes, there may be one instance where American listeners or Canadian or UK listeners may be familiar with our Belgian comics, and that is Tintin, because there was a movie made about 7-8 years ago by Steven Spielberg, and I thought it was a good adaptation, and it does show you more what typical Belgian comics are like.
Right, I like the animation series as well.
Yes, that actually was better, maybe, even. It was closer to the actual tone of the comics, which was less action-y and more toned down.
And we have more similar comics. Tintin is a journalist, he's very young. We also have this famous comic, Suske and Wiske.
Yes, that's probably the most popular one in Flanders.
Yeah, it's very Flemish, very Flemish.
Yes, and very Antwerp specifically, yeah.
Yeah, and it has all these kind of references to history.
Yes.
And it's also two young kids, actually, the heroes.
Yeah. Two young kids, they're ants.
They're not related, but they kind of have a brother and sister dynamic, because Suske has been adopted.
Yes.
And then you have Jommeke, which is also a kid, very smart kid.
So a very, very popular series.
Yeah. He has lots of friends. They all have different characteristics. And they solve problems, crimes together.
Yes, and then there are other lesser known ones like Piet Pinter and Bert Bibber. And now we're heading into territory where, no one outside of Belgium will know them. But what I noticed is there are a bunch of elements that are very common in Belgian comics. And that is, you've got a main character who is usually, well, how would you describe them?
I would say they are pretty smart and usually young.
Yes.
They're courageous, virtuous. It's usually children, actually.
Yeah, very young children or very young adults.
And I think it's usually the sidekicks, the friends, the helpers of these main characters that have the quote-unquote superpowers.
They're the ones with the real abilities.
Yeah.
That's true. It's more ordinary people surrounded by people who are more extraordinary. And there are various types that always come back, that are always there in every series, especially the professor. Every Belgian comic book series has a professor who is sort of a supporting character who helps the main characters.
Yeah, exactly.
And they are always extremely intelligent, somewhat overambitious and reckless and absent-minded. And they always come up with these crazy inventions that cause a lot of problems. That's basically, it's a theme that returns in Suske and Wiske, in Jommeke.
Or they build time machines.
Yes. In Suske and Wiske especially, there's a lot of time traveling involved. A lot of the issues are about going back to, I don't know, the 100-Year War or something, and playing a small part in the unfolding of history.
Right. And you usually have a strong man too.
Now that's very interesting. In Suske and Wiske particularly, you've got a character called Jerome, and he's super strong. He's unstoppable. And of course, the problem with that is when you've got a guy like that on your team, nobody can stand against him, so tension is usually out of the window.
Yeah, that's probably why he's not the main character.
Very often the story begins with Jerome having to go on a holiday or to a boring congress or something, so that he's not present for most of the story until they need a Deus Ex Machina at the end.
Okay, so what was the point we were trying to make with this? I guess that the hero of the story is not always the one with the superpowers.
Yes, that was the point.
So the superpowers don't make a hero.
Indeed, that's the point that we were getting at. Powers are not what make a hero, and you have to see that within the context of the setting, because a good example would be Harry Potter. Harry Potter is, he's magically gifted, and if you would put him in an ordinary context, he would jump out as a superpower type character. But within the context of the sort of magical world of Hogwarts, he's actually quite ordinary in his abilities. He's not a great wizard. He's not very good at magic.
He's gifted. He's very gifted, but
he's just decent.
But everyone's a wizard.
Everyone's a wizard. He's just a decent wizard, not a great one.
And when it comes to brains, his sidekick, his friend Hermione is way better than he is.
Yes. Hermione, yeah. So the thing is, I think Harry Potter is a good example of a guy who himself is fairly ordinary. He's kind of an everyman character, and he's surrounded by characters who are extraordinary in their abilities.
Yeah, they're gifted, except for Ron. What's his gift actually?
Yeah, he's fun to hang out with. That's his superpower.
Yeah, he makes all the perils and dangers less terrible.
I guess, yeah.
I like him as a character.
I think everybody does.
Yeah.
To come back to superheroes a bit, even when you look at Batman, let's just forget about Robin for a moment, but very often Batman is presented as a kind of loner character, all part of this dark Avenger feel that they want to give. But actually, Batman doesn't really work alone. I mean, he's got people helping him out, people who've got his back, like Commissioner Gordon, Lucius Fox, and of course Alfred, his butler.
Right.
So even Batman is not, this one unstoppable Übermensch
Yeah.
who, defeats everything on his
I think he
own.
wants the loner image to scare enemies off, I guess.
Yeah, I get that, and I agree with that, and that's why I think that Robin is just a mistake. He kind of ruins Batman's whole cool image, actually. But I do like that he's got people on behind the scenes helping
Well,
him out.
he's gotta retire sometime.
Yeah, well, they did that well in the Christopher Nolan films, where they ended with the idea of Robin sort of taking over from Batman.
Yeah. So a hero can be a loner or work in a group, or there can be a heroic duo. They do that a lot too, heroic duos.
Yes, that's kind of been a staple of our stories in a way, I think.
Now that you mention it.
Yeah, when you look at The Will of the Woods, you look at Witch Hunter.
Yeah, you got Marilia and the Wraith.
Yeah, Marilia and the Wraith, they're on...
Love and Samina.
Yeah.
Is it a coincidence that it's always a man and a woman?
No, because I like that dynamic of having a male and a female character who depend on each other and who trust each other, but they're not necessarily in love.
Right, that's what I liked about Witch Hunter, that it's not necessarily about these hot and steamy love tensions, because you get a lot of that nowadays anyway, so...
Hot and steamy love tensions, yeah.
I mean, in books...
I got that all the time.
No, I heard that, for example, this werewolf fiction
Yeah,
thing,
well,
it's all about...
I hope we are not in the same category as those guys.
Well, I think there's enough of that anyway.
Yeah.
If you just put it in the search engine of Amazon, I think you'll find enough.
There's this director, what's his name? I think Peter Weir. Peter Weir has made Dead Poets Society, and he's made the movie Master and Commander.
Yeah, right.
And sort of a typical element of his work is that they are stories about a setting that is very enclosed. The characters can't really get in or get out of that environment where it takes place, and they are all male. So in Master and Commander, you've got a bunch of sailors on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
In Dead Poet Society, it's this grammar school, an all-male boys' school. And I think that's sort of part of... That creates a unique feeling,
right.
But by simply by the fact that there are no women in the story, and that the men don't have any contact with them, but they do miss that. That on itself, I guess a prison movie is like that too. That creates a unique kind of feel. And in the same way, I think a story where you have a male and a female heroine who have a deep bond, but they are not a couple. I think that creates for a unique sort of feel, a unique dynamic also.
Right.
And in the same way Peter Weir sort of is fascinated by the all guys club, I'm kind of fascinated by that.
Yeah, I loved Scully and Mulder.
Yes, yeah.
I think there was this romantic tension there, but I think the fact that the tension was there, but they didn't really resolve it right away, that was the good part of the series, that you just had this male-female dynamic all the time. And also these characters who are very different in the way they perceive reality.
Yeah, exactly. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that every story has to be like that, but...
No, but I think that's perhaps what makes the Samina Ludlov dynamic interesting as well, because Samina is... Well, she's a witch, and he's a witch hunter, so that
kind of doesn't make...
Yeah.
That's, again, a whole side note, because we were talking about what makes a hero.
Yeah, right. So what makes a hero? Is it your inherent qualities, or is it just what you do? I would say it's more acts of heroism.
Yeah, a hero is defined by the fact that he does heroic things, which I think really just comes down to one thing: saving people. A hero saves people.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me ethic, right?
Wait! You could die. At least tell me your name.
It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me.
Bruce?
Yeah, I don't entirely agree with that, because you are not what you do. You are who you are. But
sometimes you do pretty stupid things that you don't want to make part of who you are. That's right.
yeah, it's true. Luckily, you are not what you do, because if that were true, then the lady who cleans the toilets would be actually inferior to someone who does something really important, and that's not true. They are both of equal value. So you are not what you do, but I would say that what makes you heroic is, of course, what you do, and not what you say or how you think, but what you do. And I think a real hero is someone who does something that saves people in some way.
So he's kind of a savior.
A hero is a savior, always. I don't think there's any exception. You might say, some kind of conqueror, for example.
Yeah.
Some people might look at that as a hero, but I wouldn't. I don't think Alexander the Great was a hero, for example. I don't think Napoleon was a hero, or Julius Caesar. A real hero is someone who saves people. Really, just comes down to that.
So he saves either the world or just a loved one. He's a savior in any way.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether he saves one person or 7 billion people, or the entire universe full of millions of planets, full of creatures, and it doesn't matter.
But I think the way he does it is important too, and his motivations behind it, right?
Yes, that's very true. Because if you defeat the bad guy only to become the next bad guy, then, well, you're not a hero.
No, obviously. Then you're just the next bad guy. But you can be a hero through fighting evil, right? There are many examples of that. But it's not necessary. Like, for example, I would say...
But if fighting evil comes down to saving people.
Right. But, I mean, it doesn't necessarily ask of the hero to take up a sword and kill enemies. For example, the protagonist in Hacksaw Ridge, he did not want to kill any enemy, and he decided to not fight in the war, but to participate just by saving the wounded, the injured men, and he actually made a very big difference.
Yes, and the very fact that he's got this strict moral code that he stays true to till the end shows his inner virtue, and that makes him more heroic. I don't mean by that the other guys who do fire guns are less heroic or anything. That's not what I mean. But I mean that the fact that he stays true to his principles, despite everything, despite horrible danger, that makes him heroic.
Right, and he proves that you don't need to kill your enemy in order to become a hero.
No, I think a real hero proves his heroism by overcoming obstacles, overcoming adversity, and remaining courageous, remaining determined.
Yeah, and it kind of supports your theory that a hero should be a savior, because he does save people, quite literally.
Yeah. Indeed, and you don't need to be the coolest guy, you don't need to have superpowers. For example?
Well, I think Frodo is a nice example of a hero who... He's just a hobbit.
Yes.
And I think...
He's not even a particularly strong, smart, or special hobbit.
Right, and I think that's exactly Tolkien's point. In both The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, he takes this hobbit as a courageous hero of the story, and he he emphasizes that hobbits are just these ordinary folk, ordinary creatures who like a good meal and who like reading a good book and the comforts of their home. Nothing special, actually.
That's what makes them relatable. It's the fact that they like the comforts of their homes. They are, most people are like hobbits, except for the courageous, heroic part, which is, and precisely for that reason, it's so relatable, and it's something that you can really admire more than some super gifted guy. There's a lot of talk these days about strong female characters. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. Have I heard of it? I have heard of it.
Yeah, it's sort of become a cliche, I think, to talk about that and make that a whole thing. But I just wanted to mention that a very good example of this would be my favorite strong female character. And I think even the strongest female character that I've come across in fiction would be Mrs. Brisby from The Secret of N.I.M.H. For those who don't know that movie, it's an animated movie by Don Bluth. Mrs. Brisby is a little mouse. And she's a mom, and she has kids. She's a widow also, and one of her children is very, very sick, and a very big danger is coming to her house. So she has to move her children, but she can't move her little boy because he's sick.
Yeah, he has pneumonia.
Yeah,
so.
And in order to solve that problem, she goes through some extremely dark and unpleasant and dangerous things. She shows extraordinary courage, and throughout the whole story, she remains very, very humble. She's not interested in the slightest in recognition or being honored or gaining anything. The only thing she cares about is saving her children. And I thought that was very touching about that movie, and it was very powerful. And I see that, and I think now there's a strong female character. Not Rey from Star Wars.
I agree.
But Mrs. Brisby, yeah.
I agree, yeah. And people have argued that Rey is kind of a Mary Sue. That's perhaps a matter for another episode. And I agree. I think it's not really credible that after all these heroes in Star Wars that we've encountered who have had lots of training and who have grown a lot since they first started thinking about becoming a Jedi and actually defeating evil. And Rey is like, she's there. She doesn't even need training. And she can do everything without any growth, without any arc of growth in her character. And that's...
Yeah, and for that reason, nothing she does really comes across as very heroic. Because she's never... You don't really get the feeling that she has much to fear. And a real hero is someone who has to face something that you wouldn't want to face. But they go through with it anyway. Because their love for the people they want to save is greater than their fear for their own fate.
Exactly, and I would say that brings us to the idea that you need an amount of sacrifice in order to be an ultimate hero. You offer something up. If you see true heroes, then I automatically think of these typical scenes in movies, these montage scenes.
And we're gonna need a montage. Ooh, it takes a montage.
Where the hero is kind of training for the big battle, the big encounter. And you can see that it's not easy. They kind of suffer. It takes time for them to grow into that hero.
Yes.
So they always give up something of themselves. They sacrifice things.
Yeah, and if it's easy, it doesn't register as heroic, and that's universal. That's universal. Nobody is impressed by a guy who's got incredible superpowers and who's not challenged by anything. Who's got nothing to fear, he just wins every fight. You know, the Mary Stu type character. No,
Yeah.
That's not, nobody feels that that's particularly heroic.
No, right, yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the ultimate hero for me would be Frodo, and if he doesn't sacrifice anything, I don't know who does. If you see his little face by the end of the movie, he's broken. He just cannot go on anymore. He's given everything of himself just to save everyone else. That's
yes.
Very
so
touching.
Indeed, I guess the ultimate hero would be someone who saves the whole world through self-sacrifice.
Through sacrifice, yeah. And in a way, Bilbo does that too. He sacrifices things like his reputation.
His friendship with Thorin, he endangers that.
Sometimes it's necessary for a hero to make smart or strategic decisions as well. And I think that's what Bilbo does. He makes this decision to give the Arkenstone to the elves, and he endangers his friendship with Thorin for that. But
actually, I think in the movie, you kind of get to see Thorin being in such a state that you feel that Bilbo might even be endangering his life by giving the stone away.
Exactly, but he thinks the safety of the other dwarves is much more important, and also avoiding a big battle. And actually what he was thinking about is saving lots of lives. The other dwarves, the elves...
and the people from Lake Town. Not the orcs, though. They can die. They suck. But that all of this, of course, doesn't mean that having superpowers makes a character less heroic. That's not what I meant, by the way. You can have a hero who is extremely powerful, like Superman, but who is also heroic. But the thing is that Superman is challenged, you know?
Yeah.
He's challenged morally more rather than...
That's what I really love about Superman as a superhero. It's not his superpowers that make him a hero, it's his decent upbringing in a way. Because he has all these powers and he could easily use them for selfish purposes or something else, but he's a very decent guy. He never kills anyone.
I love the fact that in Superman, it's because his parents are these ordinary people from Kansas that he's such a good guy. And that's actually emphasized in pretty much every version of Superman that I've ever seen.
Right. But what I did think was kind of sad in Man of Steel, what really didn't work for me, was that... First and foremost, the biggest supervillain in Superman history turns up, Zod, in the first movie. And
yeah, I also feel that they should have perhaps made a trilogy and made Zod the villain in the third one, because he's the ultimate Superman villain.
But not only that, but he, spoiler alert, he defeats the ultimate villain by killing him. And probably killing lots of other people while crashing into skyscrapers during the fight. That was about 20 minutes.
Yeah, actually, I thought it was a bit funny after a while. It almost looked as if Superman was intentionally destroying things and endangering people's lives.
He had a Michael Bay moment there.
Yeah, it's like, now I've got the chance to go all out. Okay, let's do it. No, I agree. That was a problem for me also in Man of Steel. Superman is a very hard character to tell stories about, because he's so almost unlimited in his power, and using kryptonite to block his power is, of course, that gets old very quickly. to keep it fresh, I think the best way to do that is to have Superman face moral difficulties and personal difficulties and personal stakes.
Right. But Superman, he does know about sacrifice. He's virtuous. He's not selfish. He's not aggressive, and he doesn't. Well, except for some versions of Superman, he doesn't cause any victims or collateral.
Yeah, well, at least he tries to avoid it.
Yeah.
You would say. Yeah.
But he didn't even try in Man of Steel.
In Man of Steel, no, he really went
He was
all
really
out.
having lots of fun.
He was having a field day. Yeah.
Always
I haven't seen any of the other movies with the new Superman. I haven't seen Batman versus Superman or Justice League. I haven't seen any of that.
Me neither. I was really disappointed with the movie, so that's probably why.
Yeah.
And I guess Smallville did a lot of things very well, and Lewis and Clark did a lot of things very well. What they did well, I think, was the tongue-in-cheek humor. Superman is a character who dresses up as a journalist just by putting on glasses. Nobody ever recognizes him. That's a funny element, and I don't think you can take that too seriously. And I think the problem with lots of superhero movies is that they want to create this very serious movie about this dark, conflicted character. And actually, comics work with types and supervillains, and
they're called comics.
Yeah.
I'm with you there. But I think this is sort of a thing. A lot of people say that the dark and brooding and semi-philosophical stuff, that's really more of a DC approach. Right. And Marvel takes the approach of more escapist fun with their movies, at least.
Well, I really liked Batman Begins. It was kind of serious. I just really liked the atmosphere and the whole background story about Bruce Wayne becoming Batman. Spoiler alert! Bruce Wayne actually becomes
Wayne
Batman.
Is Batman?
Yeah.
Okay, no. I think Batman Begins is my favorite superhero movie.
I really loved it.
To me, it gets everything right. I don't have any issues with it. I think it's a great movie overall. I've a lot of issues with The Dark Knight, which I think is the most overrated movie of all time. And I also think that The Dark Knight Rises has the same issues, pretty much.
I think The Dark Knight Rises, it kind of fixed some problems that I had with The Dark Knight. So
yeah,
it's good that it was there.
It had other problems of its own, so...
It's good that it was there, eventually.
Yeah.
I'm glad I saw the three of them.
Yeah, for me, they could have just stopped at Batman Begins. That one was just right, and it was all we needed, really.
Yeah, it's my favorite, too.
I think.
It doesn't matter what our favorites are, what our opinion is. We were talking about heroes, and Batman is a hero because he's virtuous and he sacrifices himself.
Now, much as I do have issues with the movie The Dark Knight, I do think that they did that well in the movie, which was sort of explore the heroism of Batman by putting him in front of some very difficult moral issues with, he's got so many reasons to kill the Joker, but he doesn't, because Batman doesn't kill. And that made it interesting. That was good about it.
You just couldn't let me go, could you? This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. You truly are incorruptible, aren't you? Huh? You won't kill me out of some misplaced sense of self-righteousness. And I won't kill you because you're just too much fun. I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
I just didn't think it was all that credible that he wants to put his reputation at stake in order to save the bad guy's reputation. There were really...
Oh, you're talking about Two-Face thing.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna spoil now. Everyone's seen The Dark Knight, right?
Everybody's seen The Dark Knight.
Okay. Well, yeah, I didn't think that was really credible. I didn't like the ending of The Dark Knight, and I think the fact that he actually.
I agree. The ending just doesn't make sense. I mean,
Yeah.
why wouldn't he just blame
The Joker.
Why wouldn't he just blame the Joker?
I mean, he's an insane.
In an indirect way, the Joker is actually to blame. Batman is not to blame at all. To me, it comes across as if Bruce Wayne actually he just is looking for an excuse to stop being Batman.
Right.
And he says, "Oh yeah, just say Batman did it." And
No, I'm the bad guy.
Yeah.
No, I'm the bad guy.
yeah, I know it didn't make sense.
But he kind of admitted that it was a very stupid decision in The Dark Knight Rises, and that's what I liked about it.
Yeah.
And that's why it kind of fixed it for me.
Yeah, there were a bunch of things that I did like in both Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, but there are many other things that I did have issues
I
with.
really loved the boat scene in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, that was nice.
So what can we actually conclude from our talk here?
What we can conclude is that what makes a hero is virtue. A hero is virtuous. A hero does the right thing. And a hero saves people. And the more virtuous you are, and the more you're all about saving people, the more of a hero you are.
And so that's probably why a protagonist is not necessarily a hero, right? Because a protagonist can be morally confused or conflicted. But if he doesn't ultimately make the right decision or the right choice, he's not a hero.
Exactly. Plenty of examples. Dr. Frankenstein is not a hero at all. In fact, he's a very flawed character indeed.
Yeah.
But he's the protagonist of the novel, right? You could say maybe the monster is, but the monster isn't a hero either. So lots of examples like that. Of course, in Greek mythology, you have the whole thing of the tragic hero. I don't really see the tragic hero as a hero. I see it as a very capable character with a tragic story, a tragic protagonist, really.
And big hero potential.
Yeah, big hero potential, but then they waste it. Take, for example, Anakin Skywalker in the Star Wars prequels. I don't think of him as a hero. He's very much a Greek tragedy hero type, but that's not. I wouldn't call that a hero. I would call it a protagonist.
Right, but he could have been a great hero.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's the tragedy of it all.
Yeah.
And also, a heroic story can start off as a quest for revenge. Too. That
of course,
they
yeah.
often do that, right? But as long as the hero, a true hero, would ultimately need to change that motivation.
Of course. Very often, movies, books, whatever stories start with the main character not being heroic and then becoming heroic. Take The Last Samurai, for example. Tom Cruise, he's a very pathetic character in the beginning, and then he becomes a hero. Same is true in Avatar, same is true in Dances with Wolves.
Right.
Which is just Avatar in the Wild West. I mean, let's be honest. You know.
I was actually thinking about cliches and romantic comedies where the protagonist, I will leave aside if he's a hero or not, maybe a romantic hero or something, but he usually starts off with a bet or something, that he can get this girl in his bed,
right?
But then he really starts getting
At
feelings
first
for her.
it was just an experiment, but then I really fell in love with you.
Yeah, that's a typical.
Yeah,
that's a cliche, right? That's
and that's in Avatar too. It's exactly the same in the movie Avatar. Yeah.
All right.
Look, at first, it was just orders, and then everything changed. Okay, I fell in love. I fell in love with the forest, and with the Kaya people, with you. With you. With you.
I trusted you.
Trust me now, please.
I had to think about that because then you get the cliches, the "I trusted you" scene, where she discovers that he didn't really love her from the start, but
I
it was
hate
actually
the
all.
"I trusted you" scene.
It was all a game, or it was all a bet, and
Oh yeah, and then there's the whole moping montage.
yeah, and then he has to prove himself
Yeah, and
worthy of her.
then he has to chase her in an airport, get on his knees and do this whole speech, and she gets teary-eyed, and then that's the end.
Yeah, so if he really
Every
makes,
romantic comedy ever.
if he really makes a big enough sacrifice, then we could argue that he's a romantic hero.
Yeah, you see, it's not easy being a hero because you really do have to be selfless. You really have to prove that you're not in it for personal gain in order to really be a hero, I think. So, does a hero have incredible abilities? I would say sometimes, but not necessarily. But the word hero is often used to describe someone with amazing abilities. But I think that's...
It's what you do with those abilities.
I might actually say that it's a matter of a culture that comes from different traditions. I think the idea of the hero as this incredibly capable person is very much a pagan idea of heroism, and the idea of the hero as a selfless person who sacrifices is a Christian idea. Our culture comes from a mix of pagan and Christian influences here in the northwest of Europe. And I think that's why we have these two ideas of what heroism means.
Okay, that's interesting.
No, I think maybe that might account for the fact that we have this sort of dual idea of what a hero is. And therefore, some heroes are super capable and others are just ordinary. I'm trying to think of an example of a hero who is below average in capability.
There must be one.
Maybe Forrest Gump, you might say. Maybe he's sort of, but then there's always something that they have. Forrest Gump can run really fast, or he's a really
Flash.
nice guy.
He's the Flash.
It's the Flash, yeah. It's a hero who doesn't really have any abilities.
Maybe
that's
the
hard.
dude, but he's not a hero, he's just a loser.
The dude is not a hero, no. So if you've got an example of that, I'd be very interested.
Yeah, leave it in the comments. I'm very curious too. There must be.
Even if you take Bastian in the Neverending Story, who is kind of, he's a pudgy boy and he gets picked on by the other kids, but he's got one thing: he's got his imagination.
Right, that's his superpower. So.
Yeah, so there's always something. So ability, I guess, does have something to do with it.
Yeah, I think we started off saying that not every protagonist is a hero, but the hero is often the protagonist. So I would say that you cannot really feel for the protagonist or identify with him or her if there are really no decent or good qualities about the character.
That's true.
So there must be something admirable.
Yeah.
Something...
Even in the case of Frodo, he does have a sort of his ability, I guess, would be that he's willing to go through all of this, that he's got that incredible courage and perseverance.
Yeah.
Even though he doesn't really have any other special abilities.
He's innocent and he's compassionate as well.
He shows extraordinary resilience through the evil of the ring, and that's the Hobbit's ability, I guess. Right. So there's always something. What I can't believe is that we managed to get through this whole episode without mentioning Luke Skywalker, who is sort of the archetypal example of
the hero's journey.
Of the hero's journey, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Luke Skywalker is a good example of someone who's got all of the elements of a hero. And in fact, at the end of Return of the Jedi, he throws away his weapon and, submits himself to the evil lightning bolts of the Emperor in order to make his father change his mind and choose for him.
Never. I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. So be it, Jedi.
You can't just say, oh, that was a calculated risk. No, I say that was love.
Yeah.
That was sacrifice. So, that's a nice note to end on, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
So, next week we'll be back with a new episode, as always. We hope you've enjoyed this one. If you want to support us, you can do that in so many ways, most of which are, completely free. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can like our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our podcast. You can tweet about us. You can spread some Facebook stuff about us. Visit our website. You can visit our Bandcamp page. There's so much stuff you can do. It's ridiculous.
And please, if you have any additions to this podcast, we're really interested in your opinion, things you might add to our podcast episode today. So please leave all your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, and with that, we bid you a very fond farewell. Well, not really farewell, just see you next week.